Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome at this Tech at Lunch session on revolutionizing the workplace. We will discuss today innovative tech solutions for socially engaging work. My name is Raf Franken, and I'm a senior project manager at Flanders Make. And I'm joined today by Milou Habraken, who is a senior researcher at the HIVA Institute in Leuven. First, a few practicalities. All of your cameras and microphones are muted by default during the entire presentation. Questions which you may have are you can register at the Q&A and we will discuss them by the end of the presentation. And this event will be recorded such that you can review it later at your convenience. We have split the session of today in three parts. First of all, I will briefly set a scene and discuss what we will be talking about. Then Milou will dive into the sociological context. And finally, I will finish with some technological solutions which come forward towards the problems which we are discussing today. But so what are we actually talking about? Well, if we look at the professionally active population today, we see several trends. The first trend is that the baby boom generation is gradually reaching retirement age and is leaving the workforce. On the other hand, we also see that because of a lower natality, that fewer people are joining the workforce. So in total, the active population in terms of numbers is getting under pressure. On the other hand, within Flanders, within Belgium, the make industry is still very important and relies still heavily on manual labor. So it's important to safeguard that active population. And to do this, several strategies are needed. A first strategy is to make sure that the people who are active that they remain active, so that we take some preventive measures that those people do not get sick or get a burnout or get musculoskeletal diseases and the likes. On the other hand, we also have people who today are not working, but who are part of the active population. So here we should look at ways to get these people again integrated into the workforce. And a recent measurement by the Flemish Workability Monitor that was in 2019 showed that 49.6% of the Flemish active population actually claims to have workable work, so werkbaar werk. Now, what is workable work? Well, workable work is work which doesn't cause stress, of which you don't get sick, that you go still motivated to work each day, that you have chances to learn new things, that you have room for autonomy, that you can reskill yourself, and that you can have and find a good balance between professional life and personal life. And this workability monitor uses 4 indicators: psychological fatigue, well-being, possibilities to learn on the job, and in the end also work-life balance. And throughout the rest of the presentation, we will come forward to technologies and issues on these 4 parameters. And with this, I now give the word to Milou.
Yes, so welcome everybody. Good afternoon. As Raf already briefly explained, we are looking at workable work, and in a short while, Raf will also be introducing the technologies a bit in a bit more detail. In today's presentation, I will be focusing on the connection between these two, specifically from the angle of the organizational context. So to give a bit more details, what is the organizational context? In the one part, we're looking at the organizational structures, so choices organization make with regard to division of labor, so what roles and what functions are created. On the other hand, the choices organization make with regard to coordination, and here you can think about departments or teams that are formed and how these departments and teams interact with each other. And thirdly, we look at the choices organization make with regard to resources. So in this case, think here, for instance, also towards the technology the organization adopts. And the organizational structure influences the characteristics of a job within that organization. And here we can look on the one hand towards job resources, so autonomy, as well as the level of variety that an employee has within his or her job, as well as also the support he or she receives from colleagues, but also from the direct managers. And on the other hand, we look at the demands of a job. So the level of workload, and here you can think about the amount of work someone has, but also on the timing in which work has to be done. But also we look at cognitive demands and emotional demands. And with the latter, you can think about how having work which requires contact with difficult patients or difficult clients. And finally, we look at demanding work conditions, which imply, on the one hand, a physical component. So for instance, how heavy of a workload you have to carry each day. But we also look at the environment. So in what conditions is someone working? Think of, for instance, the level of noise within the environment you conduct your work. And ideally, these resources and these demands within one's work is in balance. So when one has more demands than resources, you're not in an ideal situation, and that influences workable work. And finally, we look at the terms of employment. So you can think of a lot of aspects here. Ideally, these terms fit someone's conditions. And you can think, for instance, about the offered education and career options within an organization. And now that we've set the context, I'd like to point out two main aspects. One is that the fact that the workability of jobs is influenced by the broader organizational context. And to make this a bit more tangible, I'd like to introduce a persona we developed within a recent report. And the reference for that report is at the bottom of the slide. It is unfortunately only in Dutch, but for those who can understand Dutch, feel free to take a look about that report if you'd like more details. For now, I'm digging a bit more into Charlie, who's a technician working in a metalworking company. And Charlie is responsible for the maintenance of the machines as well as the maintenance of the building in which the organization is located. And here you can see that the responsibility given to Charlie is a choice. So you see that reflected in the organizational structure. But it also has an impact on the variety of the job that Charlie is performing. Secondly, we see that Charlie's organization has decided to downsize the maintenance team of which Charlie is part of. Again, a decision, a choice from the organization that you see reflected in the structure of the organization component, and which has an effect on the workload, because the amount of work isn't changing, but the amount of people is. And Charlie is noticing that his workload is becoming more and more increased. But Charlie is also getting older himself, and as a result, noticing that, for instance, crawling under tight spaces or checking the state of a certain component of the building isn't as physically is becoming more physically demanding, and you see here, of course, a reflection of the resources that the organization has or hasn't taken to make the work Charlie is performing more easy. And we also see it reflected in the characteristics, the demanding work conditions in which Charlie is working. And finally, we can also see that Charlie, for instance, has care responsibilities. He's taking care of the kids, which sometimes implies that the time that when he has to start or has to leave work needs to be a bit more flexible. And you can see that reflected in the terms of employment and the caregiving policies that are in place in the organization itself. So we see again that the workability of jobs is influenced by the broader organizational context. And secondly, we see that introducing technology often leads to multiple changes. And to make this a bit more tangible, I'd like to present the results from a case we did last year. And again, I'm not going into a lot of details, but if you're interested in a bit more methodological aspects of the case itself, I placed a reference of the article in which we published the work on the bottom of the screen. Again, unfortunately, it's only in Dutch, but for those interested, feel free. So we're looking into, and the case implies we're a logistical organization in which we looked at the operational level, and the existing context was a workspace in which the operators received an order of the amount of products to be picked from the shelf. And once that order was fulfilled, the operator went to the packing station to pack the respective items. And that was done through a card and handheld system. And once finished, the cycle began again. So you're looking at a sort of one cycle, which was interrupted only by when the supervisor indicated an operator to do some replenishing work. The organization in the case now chose to do a pilot project with an autonomous mobile robot, and the situation in that case was a bit more different, mostly because of decisions the organization took. So we saw again the picker who traveled, and the autonomous mobile robot who received the orders from the system and knew which orders to go to and where those orders were on the shelf. So it drove around autonomously, with of course taking into consideration the people that were working in the same workspace. And once it reached a destination, it stopped and waited for a picker to arrive to pick the respective product off the shelf, scan it, and indicate to the autonomous mobile robot, hey, the product is picked, you can continue on your route. And once it was completed, the autonomous mobile robot went to the packing station, and the packer then unloaded the products, indicated to the cobot that it was unloaded, and then started packing the products. And what you see is that this one cycle became split up into a respective picking and a respective packing task, which was now managed by the supervisor, who used the level of work as an indicator where people went. And as a result, the work became more autonomous than the initial situation. So while initially the reasoning is suspected to be that AMR reduced the level of physical work, it in addition also increased the amount of repetitiveness in the work. And so in total, the workable work did not increase in its fullness. So that's why introducing technology often leads to multiple changes, and that those multiple changes in consideration as a whole does not often lead to the initially thought workable work outcome. And with that, I'd like to give the floor back to Ralph.
Okay, thank you, Milou. So in this last session part of the session, I will discuss some technological solutions. Now, we often talk about Industry 4.0 as an opportunity, but for some people, this is not so much an opportunity, but they rather see it as a threat. Why? Because, well, in the current production environment, we often talk about highly customized products which have to be produced in a low volume. This increases the complexity of the production process, but this also increases the expectations from the operator because he has to do multiple tasks at different moments in time. For some, this may be interesting. For some, they probably don't like it at all, but it could cause stress and cognitive load. What also happens is that we talk about cobots, about IoT, about interconnectivity. A lot of jargon is used when talking about Industry 4.0. And for some people, this can cause so-called techno-stress. And it can also cause some fears that their job will be taken by all those technologies, by those cobots. So it's very important that we create awareness, that we make people familiar of what are the advantages of those technologies, because for sure there are advantages like collaborative robot systems, virtual training environments, intelligent dashboards, and the likes, which really can help people doing a better job, which makes them more happy, and so which increases basically this workability monitor we discussed before. If we look at the technologies which are at our possession to indeed achieve those goals, we can broadly group them in three. A first group of technologies rather work on reduction of the cognitive load. A second group works more on physical load. And then a third group of technologies takes a step back and looks more at the entire production environment in which the operator has to work. So this first group, reduction of cognitive load. These are technologies which reduce work-related stress, which leads to more autonomy and more variation. And here we can, for instance, distinguish digital work instructions. These are work instructions which are not published on paper anymore, but they are provided in a digital means, on a tablet, on a screen, or maybe they are even beamed by a projector on the workbench where the operator is working. An additional advantage of this is that when you, for instance, have a very experienced operator, you only provide him with the high-level instructions and you leave it up to him to fill in the individual tasks which he has to do, which leads to more autonomy for this person. On the other hand, when you have a newbie who has not done the job before, you can give him or her very specific steps for each individual action and task which has to be done. A second technology are augmented reality and virtual reality training environments. An augmented reality training environment involves a type of glasses which are basically transparent. So the operator can see through it and still sees the environment, but there is some additional information superimposed on the glasses. Pick this, put it there, so that the operator gets instruction directly on the glasses. When we move to virtual reality environment, the operator is really fully immersed in the training environment, but still can be trained on a machine, on a virtual machine, whilst the real machine is on the production floor doing its job. And then a third technology is quantification of work-related stress by using wearables and tracking physiological parameters. A second group of technologies more focuses on reduction of the physical load, and this applies specifically to operators who have highly repetitive work or who have to manage heavy loads. Here we can distinguish, for instance, smart hoists. A smart hoist is a hoist which has been equipped, improved by additional sensors, actuators, and an artificial intelligence model, because of which the manipulation of the load is made very easy. So, a matter of speaking, the operator can move the load just by a push of the finger, instead of really having to pull and push the heavy load backwards and forward. A second technology is the usage of exoskeletons, which also can reduce really the load on muscles, on limbs, through this skeleton, and hence reduce the risk on musculoskeletal diseases. And the third technology are cobots. Cobots are actually robots which have been specifically designed to work in collaboration with an operator, and hence the safety requirements are really very important in this kind of collaborative setup. And this kind of cobots can really be used in the case of fast, repetitive work with rather small payloads. And for instance, the robot can really position a workpiece in the most optimal way, such that the operator only has to, well, can move in a very ergonomic way. Then the third type of technologies, as I mentioned before, will look more at the entire environment. And what we can distinguish here, for instance, are sensor-based ergonomy monitoring systems. This could be in the form of a smart suit, but it also could be really in the form of a system with cameras which record the posture of the operator. These data are fed into a system which in the first case uses the REBA score, and then really identifies on the posture of the operator which limbs or which joints are too much impacted, too much loaded, using green, orange, and red colors. And because of this technology, the operator can improve his posture. What also can be done is that these inputs are taken into account while designing actually the workspace where the operator is working, to make sure that he really can work in an ergonomic, optimal condition. What also can be done is that environmental parameters are measured, like humidity, temperature, noise level, and that these are also used to manage the environment within which the operator has to work. And last but not least, of course, it's also important to involve the people themselves in the introduction of new technologies, creating this awareness, creating this involvement, as we mentioned before, such that they knew what are the advantages of this new technology when being introduced in the work cell. So the Flemish government also has recognized this need, and therefore has launched the Proeftuin Industry 4.0, within which technology, stakeholders, and social sciences are really working together to come to werkbaar werk, workable work. And within this project, 9 demonstrators have been used, which are at the availability of the industry, companies, SMEs, who want to try a certain technology, who want to experience, who want to expose their teams towards this new one, and hence see how it can be introduced. Also, an application will be developed which will help in the measurement of this workability index, and hence also assist companies while introducing these new technologies. So the objective of the project is to improve, evaluate in production environments the workability of Industry 4.0 solutions through personas, as Milou has explained before, but also increase the awareness of the industry, of the target audience, that they know, that they become more familiar with what are the advantages of these technologies, how they can be introduced on the work floor, such that operators working with those technologies feel at ease and don't feel it, perceive it as a threat. What is also important to mention, I referred to several times to sensors or to cameras or to wearables, that all these data which are used are anonymized and not recorded or stored, and hence that these systems are compliant with GDPR.
Yes, and then as a final final aspect, because we're talking about working together with the social sciences and the technology development. We're talking about increasing awareness and improve and evaluate the workability. And to do so within the project, we developed workshops for organizations in which the organizations are able to explore one of the 9 technologies in the project, and also have an interactive discussion on the effects that technology introduction has on the organizational work processes. The reason the slide being in Dutch is also because these workshops will only be held in Dutch. So that's just a brief indication also within what the project is working on currently and how we're realizing the elements in the project.
Okay, so this brings us to the end of this session. I hope that we were able to bring you some update on what we are working on, but I also hope that I have teased you a little bit, created some interest, and you are very strongly invited to contact myself or Milou in case of any questions. If you would like to do a pilot project, or would like to have more information. And with this, we come to the question and answer sessions. Seppe?
Hey, thank you, Raf and Milou, for the nice presentation. We don't have any questions so far, so I suggest we just wait 1 more minute to see if there are more questions coming in, as people might be typing them, and otherwise we can close the session, but let's wait just a little bit longer. Yeah, there's one person who wants to congratulate you, so he not really has a question, but
Okay.
he's saying it was
Thank
a
you
great
very much.
webinar. So, okay. As there are no more questions at this point, you can still ask your questions in the Q&A chat box. Even after the session is closed, we will still receive the questions, and if necessary, we will come back to you later by email. So you can still ask questions if you have so. But I suggest we now close the session. So I give the word to Raf.
Okay.
To wrap
So
it up.
on behalf of Milou and myself, I would like to really thank you for having joined this presentation. And as said, in case of any questions, do not hesitate to contact us. And I'm looking forward to getting in touch with you. Have a nice day. Take care. Bye-bye.